Welcome to Cheating Tales and Drama. Before we dive into today's story, we have a humble request. Please consider subscribing to this new channel. Help us hit our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers. Your support will motivate us to keep bringing you more exclusive original cheating wife stories. And now, let's get started with today's story. It was a Thursday morning, one of those bland, gray-skied starts that should have been forgettable. I'd been nursing my second cup of coffee, half reading emails, half watching the condensation crawl down the kitchen window. The hum of the dishwasher was the only real sound in the house. Celia had left early for a client breakfast, the kind she claimed was impossible to reschedule. I didn't expect the knock. Not a ring from the doorbell, not the firm raps of a delivery driver, just a single, almost polite knock. By the time I reached the door, whoever it was had already walked away. No footsteps on the walkway, no sound of a car door slamming. Just the cool bite of morning air and a small manila envelope sitting on the welcome mat. No address, no return label, no postage. It was too light to be anything important. For a second, I thought maybe one of our neighbors had dropped off a thank you note or a kid's misplaced homework. I carried it back inside, tore the flap open, and tilted it into my hand. A single black USB drive slid out, landing in my palm like a pebble. No markings, no brand name, just matte plastic, the faint scratch of wear along its edges. It could have been nothing. I should have tossed it in the junk drawer and forgotten it existed. Instead, I found myself at my desk, laptop open, sliding it into the port. The instant it connected, a single folder appeared on the desktop. For you. The air in the room changed, not in any measurable way, just heavier somehow. I double-clicked. Inside were only two items: a video file labeled Watch First and a PDF labeled Results. My stomach tightened. I opened the video. The screen stayed black for a few seconds, audio crackling faintly, before fading into grainy hotel room footage. There was no mistaking her. Celia, standing at the foot of a neatly made bed, laughing at something out of frame. She was wearing the deep green wrap dress she'd bought last spring, the one she said she was saving for special occasions. Then he stepped into frame. Tall, dark hair, maybe mid-30s, and close, too close, as if the space between them didn't exist. He said something I couldn't hear, and she smiled in that soft, private way I hadn't seen in years. They kissed. Not the distracted, perfunctory peck of a long marriage. This was different, intentional, the kind of kiss you lean into. My throat went dry. The video didn't linger. It cut sharply, jumping to clips that left nothing to doubt. My eyes stayed locked on the screen even as my pulse thundered. Every movement, every glance between them screamed familiarity, comfort, practice. When the video ended, I just sat there, my hands numb on the armrests. I opened the PDF. It was a scanned copy of medical paperwork, a clinic's letterhead at the top. STD screening results. Positive. Her name printed in the top right corner, the date barely 2 weeks old. I closed the laptop, the click of it shutting sounding far too loud in the quiet room. For a long moment, I didn't move. Didn't breathe, just stared at the closed lid and listened to the blood rushing in my ears. I wasn't sure which part hurt more. The betrayal itself, the fact that it had been captured and sent to me by someone who clearly wanted me to see it, or the cold, clinical proof of what she'd brought back with her. I didn't call her. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I slid the USB into the top drawer of my desk, next to the spare checkbooks and warranty papers, and sat back. There was a storm here, and I wasn't about to walk into it without knowing exactly where the lightning would hit. That was the moment I knew. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to end in shouting matches or slam doors. It was going to end on my terms. The strange thing about betrayal is how quickly it rewires your perception. Before that Thursday morning, I would have brushed off little things. A change in her tone, a quick glance at her phone, a late night at work. After the USB, every detail became a clue, every movement a possible tell. That evening, when Celia walked in around 8:45, holding a paper bag from her favorite Thai place, I noticed everything. The faint smear of lipstick that wasn't quite in place. The way she tossed her heels by the door instead of tucking them neatly into the rack like she used to. The phone she set face down on the counter. She talked about her client breakfast, which had somehow stretched into an all-day strategy session and ended with her grabbing dinner so you wouldn't have to cook. I nodded, thanked her, and kept my eyes steady. I didn't mention the envelope. Over the next week, I slipped into a routine that felt like living a double life. Outwardly, I was the same husband. Morning coffee together when she was home, shared dinners, even a couple of Netflix nights. Inside, I was a forensic accountant, a detective, and a chess player all at once. I started with her phone. Not by snooping directly. She kept that thing locked tighter than Fort Knox. But by watching. Who texted late at night? How often did she smile at something she wouldn't share? How quickly did she flip the screen away if I walked by? It didn't take long to see a pattern. Late-night notifications. Short bursts of typing followed by long pauses. The faint buzz of her phone on silent mode, always answered within seconds. I moved to the bank accounts next. Celia and I had joint checking and savings, but we also kept separate credit cards for personal expenses. I'd never cared much about hers, until now. Through our shared online banking dashboard, I pulled up her last 3 months of statements. There they were. Hotel charges in downtown Portland. The same hotel from the video. Twice in 1 month, both on days she'd claimed to be in Salem for networking events. Dinner receipts from a steakhouse we'd only gone to for our anniversary, now appearing on random Wednesdays. Uber rides ending on quiet residential streets far from her office. Each entry went into a private spreadsheet I kept on a hidden drive. Dates, amounts, locations. A breadcrumb trail that, when laid end to end, spelled out a story she thought I'd never read. But the real break came from something almost stupid in its simplicity. Her calendar. One night, after she'd fallen asleep on the couch, I sat next to her with my laptop and synced our shared Google Calendar to my phone. She'd color-coded her work events in blue. The hotel days? Blue. The out-of-town conferences? Blue. But there were also yellow entries, marked only with initials. JM-7 p.m. JM-overnight. JM. It took me another week to match the letters to a name. I found it through her LinkedIn connections. Jason McAllister, a strategic consultant who had gone to the same college as Celia. I clicked through his profile photo and felt my jaw tighten. The same man from the video. I dug deeper. Jason had been in town the same weeks as those hotel charges. His Instagram showed carefully cropped shots of Portland skylines, craft cocktails, and high-end restaurants. Never her face, but I knew. I recognized the neckline of the green dress in one photo, the reflection of her hand in a wine glass in another. Every discovery was a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to absorb them without reacting. This wasn't about catching her in the act. This was about building a foundation so solid that when I made my move, there would be no cracks for her to slip through. I started keeping my own secrets. I met with a divorce attorney under the pretense of grabbing drinks with an old friend. I told her everything. The USB, the video, the medical report, the financial records, the calendar entries. She listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes. When I finished, she leaned back. "You're in a strong position," she said. "But if you want this to be airtight, keep collecting. Don't confront her yet. Don't tip your hand. Quietly move assets. Document everything." And so I did. I opened a new checking account in my name only. I rerouted my direct deposit. I moved half of our joint savings into a separate account she couldn't touch without my signature. I applied for a credit card she didn't know existed building a safety net for the day I'd pull the trigger. All the while, I played my role. I brought home flowers once just to keep her from suspecting. I cooked dinner, laughed at her stories, even booked a weekend trip for us 2 months out. A trip I knew we'd never take. There were moments when the urge to confront her nearly boiled over. Like the night she came home late, smelling faintly of a cologne I didn't wear, and claimed she'd been helping a client move offices. Or the Saturday morning she stepped outside for a call, voice low, and when I opened the sliding door, she jumped like I'd fired a gun. But each time I reminded myself, not yet. The USB had been the spark. The rest of this, the records, the photos, the patterns, was the fuel. I wasn't just going to burn the bridge. I was going to make sure she was still standing on it when it collapsed. And somewhere deep down, I started to wonder about the sender. Who had left that envelope? Someone she'd crossed? A friend trying to warn me? Or maybe Jason himself, caught in some twisted game I hadn't yet understood? The not knowing was almost worse than the betrayal itself. But the answer I knew would come, just like everything else, if I waited long enough. The thing about playing the long game is that it changes your rhythm. You start waking up earlier, not because you're eager for the day, but because your brain is already running scenarios before the sun hits the blinds. By this point, I had more than enough to confront her. The USB video, the hotel charges, the calendar with JM, the Instagram clues. But I wasn't after a confrontation. Confrontations give people room to lie, cry, or twist the narrative. I wasn't going to give Celia a chance to talk her way out of anything. I wanted her to walk into a wall of consequences she couldn't climb over or crawl under. My attorney, a woman named Diane with eyes like polished steel, kept repeating one phrase: control the narrative before she knows there's a story. So I did. The first step was securing my own stability. I had already siphoned half of our joint savings into my private account, but now I began liquidating anything I'd ever brought into the marriage. The motorcycle I hadn't ridden in years? Sold. The small stock portfolio in my name? Cashed out. Even the vintage watch my grandfather left me. Appraised and stored in a safety deposit box she didn't know about. Next, I turned my focus to her patterns. Not her affair patterns, but her financial ones. Celia had a habit of keeping her personal card near the limit and paying it down just enough each month to avoid the interest hammer. I waited until the day after one of her work trips and paid the balance off in full, but with my account. I knew the next time she used it, she'd run it right back up. The point wasn't to save her from debt. It was to establish a clear record of my contributions, a thread my attorney could pull later in court. Then there was the house. We'd bought it together, but my name was on the mortgage and the title. I started documenting every repair and upgrade I'd paid for over the past year, down to the receipts for gutter cleaning and the new water heater, photos of the broken shingles before the roofer came, screenshots of Venmo transfers to the handyman, a neat chronological folder. All of this, the money moves, the receipts, the asset list, went into a digital vault protected by a password only I knew. The emotional side of this prep was harder. I had to keep sleeping next to her. I had to keep making small talk over breakfast. I had to keep pretending to be the man she thought she was betraying behind his back, all while sharpening the knife behind mine. The cracks in her mask became more obvious as I played along. She started getting bolder. Longer absences, riskier lies. One night she claimed she was meeting a client for dinner and came home with her hair damp from a shower I knew wasn't taken here. Another time, she left a silk scarf draped over her chair, a scarf I'd never seen before, that smelled faintly of cigar smoke. I cataloged it all, not because I needed more proof, but because the discipline of recording every detail kept me from acting too soon. Around this time, the sender of the USB made contact again. It was a Tuesday morning when I found a small manila envelope in the mailbox, no return address. Inside, a single printed photo. Celia, sitting at a dimly lit bar, her knee pressed against Jason's, their hands hidden under the table but clearly touching. The timestamp was 2 weeks old, one of her late nights at the office. On the back, in neat black ink, "You're almost there." I stared at those words for a long time. Whoever this was, they weren't just trying to warn me. They were invested in seeing me finish what I'd started. It made me uneasy. It also made me sharper. I installed a small camera in my home office, angled at the desk where we kept our shared bills. 2 days later, while I was running errands, Celia went into that desk. The footage showed her slipping an envelope into her purse, an envelope containing a check from a rental property I owned before we married. The check never made it into our joint account. I sent a copy of the footage to Diane. "Good," she replied. "Keep collecting." By the end of the month, I had everything I needed. Proof of infidelity, proof of financial misconduct, documentation of asset ownership, a clear chronological record of my contributions versus hers. Now it was time to move from defense to offense. The plan hinged on a single weekend. Celia had an overnight conference in Seattle. Translation, a getaway with Jason. I booked a meeting with Diane for that Friday morning and signed every piece of paperwork she'd prepared. Divorce filing, financial freezes, a temporary restraining order preventing asset withdrawal. All set to be filed at 8 a.m. Monday. While Celia was gone, I packed her things. Not in a rage. Carefully, deliberately. Clothes folded, jewelry in small boxes, toiletries in Ziplocs. Everything she'd brought into the house fit neatly into 12 boxes stacked in the garage. I changed the locks. I moved her car to the curb. I left her key on the kitchen counter next to a manila envelope containing printed copies of everything. The USB still shots, the hotel receipts, the bank records, the calendar printouts, the bar photo. On top, a single handwritten note. "You don't live here anymore." I slept better that Saturday night than I had in months. By the time she returned Sunday afternoon, looking windblown and smug, the house no longer recognized her. She tried her key, failed, then banged on the door. I didn't answer. Eventually, she found the envelope and sat on the porch, reading it piece by piece. From my upstairs window, I saw her face change. Confusion, then panic, then something close to fear. She gathered the boxes into her car without knocking again. The beauty of it was that she still didn't know the paperwork was already set to drop. Monday morning, when she tried to access our joint accounts, they were frozen. When she called my cell, it went straight to voicemail. When she texted, the bubble turned green. The silence was my answer to every lie she'd ever told me. And somewhere in that silence, I realized I hadn't just taken back control. I'd ended the story on my terms, before she even knew the ending was being written. Monday morning came without ceremony. No alarms, no racing heart, no second guessing. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and watched the steam curl in the pale light coming through the blinds. The air felt lighter. At exactly 8:03 a.m., Diane texted me a single word. Filed. That was the moment the paper fortress I'd been building for months turned into a weapon. Within minutes, the county clerk had stamped my divorce petition, the financial freeze order, and the temporary injunction preventing her from touching anything tied to my name. It was all official. The first call came at 8:17. Her number. I didn't answer. By 8:25, she'd switched to calling from an unknown number, straight to voicemail. By 9 o'clock, the texts had gone from "What's going on?" to "We need to talk" to "You can't do this to me." I didn't reply. At 10:30, my doorbell camera lit up. She was on the porch, still in the same clothes she'd worn the night before, hair pulled into a messy knot, eyes sharp with something between anger and fear. She pounded on the door, then crouched to peer through the frosted glass panel. "Open the door!" she shouted. "You can't just lock me out of my own house." My phone buzzed, a notification from the doorbell app, and I tapped it to speak without opening the door. "This isn't your house anymore, Celia," I said, voice calm, measured. "Check your email. Diane's contact info is there. All communication goes through her from now on." Her face tightened, like she'd bitten into something sour. "Who the hell is Diane?" "My attorney," I said. "The one who will explain everything you're holding in that manila envelope you picked up yesterday." I ended the call before she could answer. It was quiet for a moment, then the sound of her car door slamming broke the stillness. The engine roared, tires screeched, and she was gone. By noon, Diane called. "She's got counsel now. They're asking for a meeting." I laughed softly. "Let them ask. We'll stick to the plan." The plan was simple. Give nothing, concede nothing, and let the evidence speak louder than any argument she could try to spin. The USB footage alone, Jason's hand sliding up her thigh in that hotel room, would crush any sympathy she might get in court. But I wasn't just banking on the affair. The financial misconduct was the real blade. Judges don't like liars, but they despise thieves. Over the next 2 weeks, her attorney sent over offers that were almost comical. Half the house, despite her name not being on the deed. A share of my rental income, despite the property being purchased years before we met. Spousal support, despite her own full-time job and healthy salary. Each time, Diane sent back the same phrase: "Our client declines." Meanwhile, Jason, the other man, was conspicuously absent from her side. The gossip grapevine worked faster than any investigator. By the 3rd week, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Jason had dumped her the moment he found out about the divorce filing. Apparently, he didn't sign up for drama. That was almost satisfying enough. Almost. The real satisfaction came during our first in-person settlement meeting. It was held in a glass-walled conference room downtown, the kind where every sound echoes slightly, and every movement is visible to the office beyond. She walked in wearing a blazer 2 sizes too small, chin tilted up like she'd rehearsed confidence in the mirror. Her attorney, a man with 2 white teeth, sat beside her. Diane and I sat across the table. The first thing Diane did was slide a folder across to him. "Evidence packet," she said simply. He opened it, glanced at the first photo, her and Jason in the hotel bar, and his face went blank. He flipped to the next, then the next. By the time he reached the bank statements showing the stolen rental check, the color had drained from his cheeks. He turned to her. "You didn't tell me about this." She shifted in her chair. "It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," Diane said. Her voice didn't rise, but it filled the space with something sharper than volume. "And it's what a judge will see, along with a dozen other pieces of proof. So unless your client wants this to become a matter of public record, I suggest we skip the theatrics and sign the agreement as it stands." The agreement was brutal. For her. No claim to the house, no spousal support, no share of the rental income. She kept her car, her personal bank account, and whatever dignity she could salvage. She looked at me then. Really looked. Maybe hoping to find some trace of the man who used to forgive her for being late. For forgetting plans. For gaslighting me into thinking I was imagining things. I met her eyes without blinking. "Sign it, Celia." Her hand shook as she took the pen. It was over in less than 5 minutes. Afterward, Diane and I walked out into the cool afternoon air. "You did well," she said. "Most people would have blown up halfway through." "That's why it worked," I said. We shook hands, and I got into my car, the city stretching out in front of me like a map with no wrong turns left. That night, I poured myself a single glass of bourbon and sat by the window. For the first time in months, I didn't check the locks twice before bed. I didn't rehearse conversations in my head. I thought about the USB, about the anonymous sender who'd put the first crack in the wall, who had given me the gift of certainty. It was almost midnight when my phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. No words, just a single image. Jason, sitting alone at the same hotel bar, looking over his shoulder like someone had just called his name. Underneath, a caption. You're welcome. I stared at it for a long time before smiling. Whoever they were, they'd done me a favor I couldn't repay. And maybe they didn't want repayment. Maybe, like me, they just wanted to see the story end the way it was supposed to, with the liar losing everything and the one who was lied to walking away intact. I deleted the text, finished my drink, and turned off the light. Tomorrow would be quiet, and for the first time in a long time, that sounded perfect.